A trio of emperors face a trio of troubles. Is this the beginning of the end for empire? Meanwhile, the Foundation faces troubles of their own as a group of barbarians prepare to attack. Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today we are discussing the fourth episode of the gripping science fiction series, Foundation. So spoilers are ahead. And don't worry, this won't be the beginning of the end for us if you remember the trio of liking, subscribing, and clicking the bell icon for notifications. And with that, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was a great episode. This was a setup episode. You know, it's getting some pieces into places now that we're spending more time with Salvor and the repercussions of Day's choice, 35 years ago of attacking.
Right.
We're kind of seeing where things have, where the pieces have landed, but we're also setting up pieces for future altercations maybe in this episode.
It's interesting seeing the massive split between current day and the Day from 35 years ago who's now Dusk. Day is really blaming Dusk for pretty much everything that's happening, which is interesting because, according to Harry, it's all inevitable. The best we can do is to
Soften the blow.
soften it. Right, exactly. And maybe make it not last as long. But it really is kind of interesting seeing him so unhappy with the choices that were made, and kind of seeing a validation that maybe the Dusk of that time 35 years ago might have been right to go for mercy, like that could have
Right.
had benefit.
It does seem, I thought that this day was going to be more of like a forgiving day, like he was going to be one that's like, oh, okay, like I saw the day before me, you know, the bridge fell under him. He, hit them with the big stick. He even talks about how he was afraid and he was like, I didn't want to do this. I thought we were going to see him be a more kind day, but it does seem that he is kind of a bit of an asshole.
um I think he's seeing incompetence all around him. Like there's I don't remember how long he told the statisticians that they've I think it's 3 decades, like
3 decades,
something like
30
that.
years.
They three decades that they've had to work on this, and the best that they have to come up with is something along the lines of like, well, we think he's wrong because everything looks fine. It's like, okay, well, what does the math say? Like, can anybody actually look at the numbers and have found anything in this, or is nobody smart enough to understand Harry's numbers?
I think it's
So,
close enough. I think we're
right,
probably not going to. It's a non-zero
right,
chance.
right. Meanwhile, he is seeing, I think when they replayed what Harry had said during the trial, I didn't realize that he totally called out what is now happening just 4 episodes later. That's kind of interesting. I never thought about it, and yet it's pretty obvious. Like if his numbers really can predict the future, then why should we not have like paid more attention to, like, really picked apart the words of what he said and not just taken them on, surface level of like bad things are going to happen. He gave specific examples, and two of those are happening.
What's crazy is how much that speech affected Dawn at that time. Because, he brings it up to Dusk, who was Day back then, and he's like, you know, we listened to this. He told us this is what was going to happen, and we ignored it. And when it plays back his thing, he mouths the words of Hari
Right.
Seldon, meaning that he has thought about this a lot. He has been holding on to this because I think that just like the attack from the Anacreans and Thespins, he was afraid, and he's afraid of Harry's warning more so than Day and Dusk, and I think he's just been sitting on it for 30 years thinking about it.
And I think, one of the big things that has emerged is an interesting question, which I didn't, the big religion is moving towards an old form of thought, which basically at some point part of it means that you can only have a soul if you are an individual and they aren't individuals. And that is kind of interesting that so much of this is around religion, and we're seeing a group move from being a science-based group to being believers of the works in that science, like the foundation. There are so many kind of religious topics, and it's interesting kind of seeing that come up of like what makes a person a person, like what makes them real,
Right.
like obviously they can recreate life, but is that really like a new spark? Is it
Right.
unique? Does it have a soul? It's kind of interesting, and I didn't expect that in this.
The one thing I'm curious about is when Harry's math of psychohistory, they talk about that it can't predict an individual in its calculations. It can only predict like cultures rising up, falling down, like the basic stuff. With the new religion that's coming up that goes back to believing in the souls of the individual, are the clones, because there's three of them, are they considered an individual, or are they like a force in this, like could they be a variable that could be studied and tracked, and that's how we know the empire's gonna fall? I'm wondering, because like we were talking about the individuality of people and how we can't predict things, but yet we can predict the fall of the empire. We won't know what Cleon's doing. I just wonder how that all connects, if that connects, if that is related to the math.
I mean, I think that a lot of these details aren't necessarily figured out with this. It's like it's not like they know which religion is going to break away from, the larger kind of ideas in the empire, and what is going to cause that, but rather just that, a religion is going to kind of turn away from this, that there is going to be, an insurrection that will rise up from inside. I don't think they know the exact reasons why that is going to happen, but rather that like that larger event will happen, but not necessarily every detail that kind of brought us to it. But I don't know. We'll see. Like I think that it's pretty interesting seeing how this show is. Once again, I kind of said this in the beginning. It doesn't feel like things are being teased out, but rather that like there's just a big scope of things to deal with, and it's just taking us time to zoom out and be able to see that whole scope. So things are just happening at a natural pace versus like things being kind of, concealed or hidden. And I kind of dig that. Like it's interesting storytelling, especially loved the last show we did. Absolutely loved it. Amazing. Severance, if you haven't watched it. But that definitely had things that were kind of teased out over time, versus being like just huge scope and being zoomed in, and it just takes time to see everything.
Did you
So I'm
see
enjoying that storytelling.
did you see a little bit of a connection between Foundation and Severance in this episode?
No, I'm curious what that is.
So, do you know the name of the new religion that's taking over?
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I did write it down.
To make
Luminism.
Luminism. This is Lumen Industries from Severance
Leaving.
thousands and thousands and thousands of years into the past. They still have a foothold. They're still severing employees, and now they're starting a whole religion on it.
It's a very real
There is
possibility.
no way I'm wrong on this one. This is the only ironclad theory I have, and I think that it's the correct one.
I can see that. Speaking about like the connection of this to like our world, I do think it's interesting that we don't know where this is in comparison to us. We don't know when it is in comparison to us. Is this crazy far in the future? Is it in the past? Like, are these different beings? We don't really necessarily understand all of this. And yet, what I think is really interesting about it is everything about it feels, it does feel futuristic, but at the same time, it also feels very, very familiar. Like the cut of the clothing, even if it does have a futuristic look, also looks like classical. Like it could stand the test of time. Not like something from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which may come back in waves, but when you look at it during certain periods of time, you're like, ugh. Like this stuff looks, the buildings, the way that people walk and talk, like everything about it seems kind of to have that like classical modernism, that is both like alien and familiar at the same time. This kind of weird juxtaposition, but it does really make you feel at home in this.
I I agree. I feel like it's something that it and Star Wars does really well. Like, you think about like when they're in their ships, they're not like these advanced technology ships where, they're pulling up like these beautiful HUD displays. They're kind of like, janky old beater cars where you have to like flip the switches a couple times. You gotta crank the wheel while you hit the ignition. Like, and I had noticed, a little bit of this with the speeder that Salvor drives around. It has that, like, it looks like a beat up car. Like, it's not this like advanced, yes, it floats, which makes it advanced in that regard, but it feels just like it would be a car like on this beat up planet, like on this, you know, poorer planet. Like, they have cars that aren't as good as what, the Empire has.
Oh yeah.
I do have a theory. A real
Okay.
theory. I think I know who the ghost is.
Okay.
I think the ghost is Raish.
I think so too.
Okay. After seeing one, if Salvor Hardin is Gale and Raish is Zygote, then that means she's half Gale, half Raish. And Raish, I think, knows about the vault and Hari Seldon's plan. I think he's probably the one that knows most of Harry's plan. And I believe he's talking to her because that's his daughter.
I can definitely see that. I do wonder if we get Raish back, because we never, his fate wasn't confirmed. We
It
just
was not.
jumped to like 19 years later or something like that. So I feel like we could possibly see him again, but I definitely like that theory. I definitely subscribe to that. The knife that the kid had was the same knife that Raish used, so I kind of felt that same
Oh.
thing. And
I thought because of Harry's story, where he was talking about him, he would sneak into the library as a kid and steal the books. That's what made me think that it was Raish. I didn't even think about the knife.
interesting.
But the knife is
Yeah,
another point. Huh.
Yeah, he had that same knife. And it does kind of make me wonder about it's odd they keep making a big point about Harry's calculations can only deal with the big. It can't deal with like the individuals. Salvor is an outlier, like she wasn't part of a plan. She's an individual, so we can't know what she's going to do, and we can't know how she's going to affect the plan. Um, but at the same time, it feels like it's working.
I think that she is more part of the plan than everybody else thinks. Everybody else is kind of, they feel lost, like they don't have the teachings of Harry anymore. Like they're like, we don't
Right,
really know, like we can't read this thing. We were told to come here and just like build a foundation, but we don't really know what to do anymore now that Harry and Gale are gone. And I think, like we are seeing, like she can predict coin flips every time. It's not lucky anymore.
right.
Like she has a skill, and it's either she, they talk about that fate, the hand of fate that's guiding them.
Right.
I think that she can tap into that fate, whether she's counting numbers in a way that she doesn't even realize. But I think
Interesting.
that since she's, Gail's daughter, I think that she was always part of the plan, part of Harry's plan.
I can very much see that. I don't know how all of that works, but I could definitely see that. And she I like that she thinks for herself, versus Mari and Lewis, keep going back to like it, what what does Harry say about this? It's like Harry did write about this, but he also didn't say the details. Like instead of running to the books, we should be actually trying to do something about it. It's kind of interesting. It's like if Harry's predictions work all the time, then theoretically you shouldn't need them. Like you shouldn't. It's one of those things where it's like you find you find something that tells you what the future is going to be like, and then you do everything you can to make sure that that future comes to pass. But it's like if that future is going to come to pass regardless, shouldn't you be able to like burn that plan and it still happens?
Right.
Like do you need to go back and like keep reading those and trying to think like what does this tell us to do? Like and instead just kind of figure that out, and theoretically it should work out.
Almost like when Harry was talking about, oh, we can soften the blow. Could they really soften the blow, or was it always predetermined that the numbers don't lie? That this is when it's gonna start. Like, is there a way to soften the blow? And if you know that it's supposed to be doomed by a certain point, like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy at that
Right.
point,
Yeah.
I I feel like once you know about events, that almost like means the events would have to happen. Otherwise, if you go against it, right? Like say you know you're gonna get robbed a week from now, and so you're like, I'm gonna try to do everything in my power to not get robbed, and so you like stay inside, you don't do anything, and apparently because you didn't go outside, you forgot to go to the bank to check something, and somebody stole your account. Like
Right.
it reminds me of the Time Machine. I don't know if you've read that book or watched the
I
movie.
by H.G. Wells.
Yep, where he would go back and he was trying to change the events of the loss of his love, and every time he went back to change it, it just, no matter what, she would always die.
Right.
The hands of fate.
Right. Or it does definitely seem kind of like that, where it's like the the future is inevitable, so it kind of going back to time travel-y things, it kind of reminds me of, like Interstellar, where it's, he tries so hard to like reach out and change things, and it turns out that that was part of the past all along. Like him, he didn't do anything different. He didn't do anything new. Everything that he was trying to do something new was something that had always been there, you know? And it kind of reminds me of that, of like, if it's going to happen, does it matter if you read it from a book or if you just try and like think for yourself? But it does seem like that, like this is building towards like a group that is just following his words versus necessarily thinking things out for themselves. One thing I did find curious about the group was
Which group?
the foundation.
Okay.
Was that the Anacreon's bow that was the gift that Salvor picked up a bow
Right.
from like storage? Did they?
I couldn't tell if that bow was the bow that they took from her. So I thought it was her bow that they had taken from her. Though I did think it was.
I think you're correct. I'm a big dum dum, and I was so I like here's what was my confusion. I forgot that she was captured, so obviously they would have the bow, and I was kind of thinking like, why would they have the bow that was the gift to Empire?
Well, so that's what I
And
thought it was the gift from Empire.
and then that led me down a rabbit hole of like, is that well, first it was like, why would they have it? But it's not like Empire cares about these gifts because he hates them. So they might have been like, let us have these for posterity's sake, so we can like record history. And he's like, I don't care about them. I'm gonna murder most everybody. And so I was kind of thinking that, and then I was wondering whether or not like that was one of the reasons that they went to that planet, was to get that bow as kind of like an fu to Empire, of like, you know we're coming after you guys, and we've got our gift back, which is something that our badass archer is really badass with. But you might 100% be correct.
I did
I
think
think
it
you're probably correct.
I did think it was the same bow though. So I thought they, with the whole, you know, bombing of their planets, I thought that he just gave the bow back to the Anacreons, like to, probably gave their presents back to them and said, like,
Mm,
I don't want your gifts anymore. Take these gifts back. And I think that's why she had it. But also,
okay.
now I'm thinking about it because when she's holding her at gunpoint, I can't remember if she's carrying a bow or not, but she definitely has a gun in the car. So
Right.
I'm not sure.
I think we'll probably see in probably the next episode. But I do think so. Farah, I think her name is. I do think she is very smart, and I think she is possibly on her way to outsmarting Lewis.
Oh yeah.
Like Lewis doesn't want a fight, and it sounds to me like she's saying, "Look, we just want this module, and then we'll leave." So then Lewis is possibly like, "Okay, let me give you the module, and then let me take you back to your people, and everything will turn out well." Like Lewis is
Well, actually, I kind of, I feel like maybe I'm a little bit like Lewis right now because I thought maybe she's being truthful. Maybe like that's why, like, cause what else would she be there for? Like, is she really gonna try to?
she's I think she's playing him like a fiddle, because if you remember when the call came out that, like the the encampment is being surrounded, Salvor said like, I shouldn't go. Something about like It was basically like
I can't leave her.
it
Oh, I
was
can't leave him with her. And her mom said, I'll
it was
babysit him.
but it was even something like it almost sounded like she's mentally stronger than Lewis. Like basically it sounded like Lewis is gonna fall into a trap. Like she's smart, she's gonna set a trap, and he's just gonna fall into it. And I kind of feel like that's what's happening, is
I
that a
fell into
trap
the
is being
trap.
set up.
I'm like, oh, that makes sense. They're just, technologically behind, and they just want these drives so that they can go live on a place that's not, you know, irradiated.
Yeah.
I believed it.
I'm the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was Day being out and about soon. Like this is the first time that Day is like the ruling emperor, not the emperor to be or the emperor that was, but like the ruling emperor, has left the planet. And this does seem like an interesting scenario to see him out in the world with others, and like how is he going to deal with this religion, because he was giving dust crap for the stick. So is he going to try and deal with it softly or not? And then I also kind of wonder about, I feel like we're going to see more about their armor, because we already saw, in one episode with the seer priest that they have armor. Now we see like how this armor works, which also lets us know that I think they're like, I'm pretty sure that you could still drown with this armor. I'm pretty sure you could still be hung the painful way with this armor, because I think if you were dropped, it would prevent your neck from snapping. But then once it slows down, that cord would tighten really slowly, and you would go the long hard way. Like I think there are lots of ways that this armor can be beat, and so I'm interested in
I
seeing if
think
he gets in a scary situation.
you can be poisoned because
Right, right, exactly. Like
he's
yes,
questioning whether to
yes,
eat these leaves or not. So I think he
right,
is not invulnerable.
right.
Why do you think he jumped out the window? Do you think this is something they always experience? Do you think this is something because of the tumultuous times that they're going through, and he doesn't want to be the Day that has to take on that? Or was he testing the armor? What was his motivation for jumping, do you think?
I mean, like, what is this? I think it has something to do with this pain he's dealing with,
Oh, she does mention the
because
pain.
yeah, because she's like, here, this will help you with the pain. And at first, he obviously, tried to be dismissive, and then he's actually heeding her advice. He asked for a kilo of
Right.
of that plant.
He said, if it
So
works, if you're
something,
not dead in a couple hours, give me a kilo of this.
yeah. So something is going on, and I don't know what that is, but I think it's either related to that, or it's like maybe having this shield around him and not being able to experience a lot of like normal touch, and kind of like ways that people connect. Maybe that has him feeling empty inside, and he wants to feel something, and he hasn't tested it out. He doesn't know like how strong it is. Like, could could it really work on a fall, or could that be his way of like finally feeling something? So those are kind of two theories around that. We'll see.
But we can agree that he definitely likes the garden girl, right?
I think so, but also did he? I don't know if he told that one guy to call off the.
That's what I was thinking, because like he was like, "Oh, she's a problem," and then he's like, "I deal with problems," and like he didn't
Right.
say like, "No, no, no, I'll take care of it." He just like walked away, and I think that was representative with the dragonfly that we see him walking behind her. But I
And he
feel like,
looked worried.
yeah,
And
he
then when the guy kept walking, he looked kind of relieved.
right. Okay, so that's I glad that we are on that same track. That I think that guy is cool. The Shadow Captain Oberic, I think his name is, and
Yes.
I forget his title, but I hope we see that guy more, and I hope he does some cool
Shadow
things.
Master Obricht.
Yes, yes. I
He
I'm
the Dawn called him captain and he corrected and said Shadow Master, which
right,
is a cooler title. Like I don't
right.
know, even if it's like down from captain, to me that's a cooler title.
Oh yeah, I'd rather
Shadow
be
Master.
Shadow Master. The one thing that I really liked about this episode, about the two storylines going on, about Salvor's story and the Empire story, we talked a lot about barriers. So Salvor had their barrier up and was keeping the Anacreans out of their barrier, trying to keep everyone out, where the Empire seems like he wants to let people in to his barriers. And
Right.
I thought that was a nice little parallel that was going on.
That is interesting. I like that. I like that a lot.
And with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you guys so much for joining along with us. Next week, we will be back with episode 5 of Foundation. So, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks.